Okay, this is the second half of Hamlet Act 1, and I was just in the last video talking about his mother and how he says, "Frailty, thy name is woman." He can't believe his mother would be so flighty. She was crying at the funeral like Niobe. Now, Niobe is a Greek goddess from legend, and she had a lot of children, and she boasted of it to her another goddess, Latona or Leto, who had only 2 kids. So Latona's kids, Apollo and Artemis, got revenge for their mom by shooting down each of Niobe's kids. And Niobe cried and cried without stopping and went back to her home on Mount Sipylus. The gods put her out of her misery by turning her into a stone that still weeps. And in Turkey, there is a Mount Sipylus, and on it is a rock that kind of looks like a woman's face. You can Google it. It's kind of cool. And it's called the Weeping Rock. It's made of porous limestone so that when it rains or when snow melts, water like seeps out of it. I think that's pretty cool. So Hamlet is so disturbed by his mother remarrying that he even calls it incestuous. That was weird. Incestuous. And it wasn't that uncommon for a widowed queen to marry the new king, even if the church deemed it incestuous. But Hamlet is still not having it. The quickness of the whole thing is really making it so much worse. And if you think of it, he also may have had a chance at the throne if his mother had waited. Her marrying Claudius so quickly just cemented his succession. Hamlet was trying to get home as fast as he could with hopes of being the new king. And not only is that hope gone when he arrives, but he has to figure out how to grieve his father's death alone. He has to watch his mother marry his uncle and act like he's happy about it. He says, "But break my heart, for I must hold my tongue." He can't talk to anyone about it. His heart's breaking. He can't express his feelings to anyone. So Horatio tells Hamlet about the ghost, and Hamlet agrees to come keep watch with them in the evening. So in scene 3, we start with Ophelia, her brother Laertes too. He's going back to school in France, and he was just there for the coronation, and he's saying goodbye to his sister. He asks her to write him, but also he gives this kind of long speech of warning. He tells her to be careful with giving her heart to Hamlet. He warns that even if Hamlet professes his love, he's still at the mercy of royalty, of being a prince, you know? He's not able to commit to marriage or anything because of his royal status. He warns her not to do anything that would make Hamlet lust after her. She is young, and youth makes her less in control and more naive. And she basically is like, good advice, brother, but just don't be a hypocrite and, go off on your own primrose path of dalliance. Their dad comes in to say goodbye too. He's already said goodbye once, but he's going to do it again. He's quite long-winded. But we get some of the most famous lines of this play, most especially, "This above all, to thine own self be true." I want to share a funny quote about this line from Isaac Asimov's Guide to Shakespeare, referring to that "this above all, to thine own self be true" line. He said, "How many skinflints who know not one other verse in Shakespeare are letter perfect in this, to use at the first sign of another's need." And this speech by Polonius is interesting because it is all very good advice. If you look at it for what it is great life advice. It's really great. But it likely wasn't from Polonius's heart. He is using common adages or platitudes, these little common motivational phrases like you'd find in a collection of like little proverbs or truisms. And in fact, many of these were found in collections of this sort in Shakespeare's time. Shakespeare, after all, the book, says, "The advice may be wiser than the speaker." Modern quotes cite Shakespeare at their peril when they are actually and recognizably quoting Shakespeare characters carefully crafted to be at variance with their own language. These phrases seem to have a certain moral or ethical force when considered in the abstract, but uttered on stage by a dramatic character who has been interpreted in every mode from hapless wise counselor to doddering old fool, these same words begin to coruscate with inadvertent irony. So I think that's kind of interesting to think about. So, the words are good, but maybe not as meaningful coming from Polonius. Polonius, oh my goodness, I'm stumbling over my words here. Polonius piggybacks on Laertes' advice to Ophelia and tells her that she's too young to understand what's going on and to understand what Hamlet really wants. She says he has given her affection lately, and he asks her if she believes in this affection. And she says, "I do not know, my lord, what I should think." We don't get to see much into the mind of Ophelia. The directing and acting choice can play a world of difference with her. There's so many ways you could go with her. Is she just saying this because there's no way she is opening up to her dad, who is being kind of condescending? Or is she confused because she both likes Hamlet and is kind of startled by these warnings she's getting? Or does she really not have a strong opinion about it? Or maybe she has a really strong relationship with her dad and she takes his advice to heart and really thinks about it. It all depends on how you want to play that. But Polonius kind of rudely says, think yourself a baby, that you have taken these tenders for true pay, which are not sterling, meaning you're like a little baby if you think his tenders or affections are true and real. And he keeps using her word tenders and twisting it and throwing it back in her face. He says, tender yourself more dearly, show yourself some more respect and don't let him toy with you and string you along. Kind of the whole men only want one thing kind of speech. And in the end, Ophelia says she'll obey her father and not entertain Hamlet. In the next scene, Hamlet is out on the watch shift looking for his father's ghost. There's this all-night drunken celebration going on in the castle, and Hamlet thinks it's a bad tradition, this drunken partying, when he says, more honored in the breach than the observance. He is saying the honored tradition would have more honor in breaking the tradition than in continuing it. He says it makes them look bad to other countries. It makes them overlook the actual accomplishments that someone has. Just like someone who has a bad habit or a defect of some sort doesn't get credit for all their accomplishments because people only notice that one negative thing about them. So that's kind of what he's saying. And it's not just Claudius being drunk all the time, though. It's a tradition in the country. So the ghost comes, and Hamlet follows it to speak more privately to it, against everyone's better judgment. He says, my fate cries out and makes each petty artery in this body as hardy as the Nemean lion's nerve. The Nemean lion is like the fierce lion that Hercules had to defeat in one of his tasks. And then we have another extremely famous line, something is rotten in this state of Denmark. So the spirit tells Hamlet all about how his father was poisoned by Claudius, a poison put into his ear. Hamlet hears this and says, oh, my prophetic soul, my uncle? When he says my prophetic soul, he's saying that he kind of knew it all along. He prophesied it. He suspected foul play. And you also hear the ghost call Gertrude adulteress a few times. We don't know 100% if she was cheating on her husband before he died or not, but the ghost seems to be accusing her of that. And it's implied a few times later in the play as well. And it would be another reason for Hamlet to be so frustrated with his mom. I'm not going to say for sure either way if she was adulteress or if it's just that they're mad at her for marrying Claudius. But we do know that some of the older versions presented Gertrude as adulteress before her husband died. So it could have been carried over. I want to talk for just a few minutes about Hamlet's reaction to the ghost telling him about his father's murder and asking him to get revenge. So take a minute to think about all the things that have been leading up to this point. His father dying, the grief of that, his rapid flight to get home to see if maybe he could be the next king, and then the shock of not only losing that chance, but also seeing the woman who raised him already married to his uncle who mistrusts and knows very well how little it would take to see him as a liability. See Hamlet as a liability to his seat on the throne, and that same uncle wants him near to keep an eye on him. He has no one to confide in, and tensions are very high. And now he finds out that it was murder all along. And the ghost is even calling his mother adulteress. Can you see how things have been building in just a few short scenes? Can you see how he would react so quickly? Yes, thy commandment, the ghosts, all alone shall live within the book and volume of my brain. He is going to get revenge. This is going to be the most important thing to him. But then he suddenly says, my tables, which means like his notebook or whatever the equivalent of a notebook at the time would be. He wants to write some things down. So at first he's talking about his mom. He's saying, oh, most pernicious woman. And then he switches and he's talking about Claudius when he says, oh, villain, smiling, damned villain. And I think if I was directing this, or playing the part, I would want a beat change between those two parts, from when he talks about his mom to when he talks about his uncle. In acting, a beat change is where you have a shift in the character's motives or objectives or feelings. And sometimes you actually do take a beat to show this change happening. And I'd want to show that his gears are turning. He's thinking at 100 miles an hour. He's pacing. He's He's coming up with, he's processing everything. And you can, I would like the actor to show that he's processing everything. He's coming up with ideas. I love what A.C. Bradley says about Hamlet. He said, he was forever unmaking his world and rebuilding it in thought, dissolving what to others were solid facts and discovering what to others were old truths. I like to imagine Hamlet like this in this scene. He's coming to the realization that he can't just kill his uncle. So I see those lines, villain, villain, smiling, damned villain, as him realizing in that moment that if he kills his uncle outright, things will not end well for him. Because he's a smiling villain, meaning no one else knows that he's evil. Gertrude probably has no idea. He is probably charming the nation right and left. If he kills a popular king and is caught, there is no way he can get away with it. He'll be put to death. So his eagerness to get right to it is maybe cooled a little. And I would want to show that transition of being super eager to go do this to like, I gotta, hold on just a sec. And then he writes down in his notebook that one may smile and be a villain. So he's writing that down like, don't forget this, Hamlet. Don't be hasty, Hamlet. One can smile and be a villain. And if we take this a step further, no one heard what the ghost is saying to him. It's his word against the king's, and he has zero evidence. He doesn't even fully believe that the ghost was actually his father. Maybe it was, and he comes to kind of think of it that way, but he's also aware that this could be some sort of evil spirit taking the shape of his father. And to take it one more step further, and we could see that Claudius is paranoid about Hamlet trying to take the throne. But imagine how much more paranoid he actually would be if, how much more paranoid he actually is, how much more paranoid Claudius actually is now that we know he's killed his brother. You know, he didn't just take the throne, he took it by killing someone. So he's probably really paranoid. And if he ever finds out that Hamlet knows, then Hamlet is an extremely dangerous situation. Claudius's reason for staying his hand suddenly doesn't hold as much weight, and all that matters would be getting rid of Hamlet. But if Hamlet can prove that the king did it and let everyone know with real evidence before Claudius knows Hamlet knows, then maybe he can actually get away with his life and the throne. So I think it's important to remember these things as we go forward. I think it's easy to forget all of this and just assume that Hamlet is a moody, inconsistent, depressed person who is procrastinating the act of revenge because he's too weak to go through with it, or maybe that he has some conscience against killing a person. There might be some truth in those things as well. So many people see this play with the central theme of procrastination being Hamlet's main flaw. His failure to act quickly ruins everything. And personally, I think he's grieving. I think he's stressed to his limit. I think he's sometimes impulsive. But also, I think he's also deep in the strategies that are necessary for him to pull all of this off. And that maybe reading between the lines is needed a little bit. This is just one take on it, though. I've read a lot of commentary on Hamlet's character, on the reasons why he doesn't just go straight to the king and kill him, and why we have 4 more acts after this. Spoiler, he doesn't kill the king in the next scene. We have a lot of the play left. And I think that there is something interesting in all of these different theories. I know how I like to perceive him, and it starts with this setup that I have just been talking about. Because I think it gives him more clear objectives as an actor. And I think it's always better when an actor knows what his objectives are, something actionable. His main goals in a particular beat or a line or in the play overall. It drives all of the choices and then also drives all of the emotions in a more natural way. I think it is far more stronger to decide the objective like that than deciding Hamlet is depressed and then trying to act depressed. It can come off as less convincing. Playing to an emotion or a mental state is always a weaker choice in acting. But if you realize all of this backstory and build up and realize that Hamlet's objective is to find a way to avenge his father in a way that keeps him safe and has the most potential for a good outcome, possibly the throne. Now that objective informs every choice he makes for the whole play and drives all of the emotional responses. Now, this is my personal view of acting. It's a specific acting method based around finding a character's actionable objectives first and foremost, and then the emotions come. And it's the method I personally prefer. There's lots of acting methods, and if any of you are actors and really hold fast to one of the other methods, just don't come at me. But I would like to encourage you to decide how you would like to see Hamlet, how you interpret his choices, and why you think he doesn't just go straight and kill the king in the next scene. Ivor Brown said, Does hesitation to murder need all the argle-bargle that the professors have bestowed upon the psychology of Hamlet? I don't know. We'll talk about it more, but I'm running out of time, so I will leave you here. Thanks for joining me. See you in the next act.